Hello and welcome to Winning in Professional Services. I am Scott Pressimone and I'm joined by my co-host Matteo Travado. The topic for today is humanizing your brand as a professional services firm. So the topic I think is a really important one because it's so hard to differentiate yourself, and it's so important to differentiate yourself when you're selling any sort of service that your competitors are selling something very similar to you. So, Matteo, can you explain what we're talking about here? What does it mean to humanize your brand, and why do you think it's so important?
Yeah, I I think humanizing a brand, especially in a professional services context, is really about making sure that your brand, your company image feels like a real person and not just some faceless company. And we see them often, especially I do see them often working with a lot of professional service companies. And in general, it's really about giving your company a personality that people can actually connect with. So, how would you do that? I think maybe it's first of all showing the real people and personalities behind your company. Um, Talk to customers the way you would talk to, I wouldn't say necessarily a friend, but be personable. Don't be too stiff and too formal. Share the good and share the bad things, of what it means to working with you. Be honest, and I would also include standing for something when it comes to the services that you're offering. What are the things that you as a company stand for? What are the beliefs you have? And what are the things that you don't think are part of your sort of identity? So this is, in my opinion, sort of a little bit of a definition of what it means for me humanizing a professional service company. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, well, I do think there's been a big change in how people interact with brands. So I recall maybe 10 or so, maybe 20 years ago, when I was first very interested in business and studying in business school and everything. And some of the people that I know that started companies at that time really wanted to almost fake it. They wanted to look bigger than they were. And so if you started a photography business, you might show a whole bunch of brand logos about how you're such a big photography firm. You might show a team page that shows all these people that don't actually work for you. So there's just this idea of try to look bigger than you actually are, try to look more professional than you actually are, and maybe even replicate things from those bigger companies that you might look up to. And while I think that could work in some ways, I think that now people are looking more at who are the owners that I'm hiring here? Who's the company and what's the vision behind the company that I'd be working with? Do I trust these people? And when you have a company that's using a lot of stock photos as a very simple example, a lot of images of just geographic images or something that's just like a bunch of angles and big buildings and almost something to look very corporate. I don't think that has the same effect. I don't think people look and say, oh my gosh, this company must have a big building and they must be huge. I want to work with them. I think more often the consumers are saying, do I trust the people? Do I want to work with these people? What do these people look like? What do these people believe in, as you've said, Matteo? And are they the type of people that I want to work with? And so you really have to show that. And that's really what we mean by humanizing the brand is showing the people, showing the faces, demonstrating the beliefs that the company has, the vision the company has. And while it's not all about you, it's not all about, me, we, want, right? It's instead more about if you share what you're trying to do and how it helps your end customers, then they're going to go along with you for the ride, or they're going to want to be along with you. And so I think that's what it means to me to humanize the brand. To continue on a little bit, I would say that we want to be able to build trust and authenticity. We want to be able to form some sort of an emotional connection with our audience. And those two things really help us differentiate ourselves in the market. And again, I'll go back to your point, Matteo, of you have to kind of stand for something. Just as some of the past topics we've discussed, this means that you might actually push some people away. When you are trying to form a connection with some people, you might be pushing off other people that don't have those same beliefs or don't think that way or whatever it may be. But still, I think it's better to stand for something. Otherwise, you're very easily blending in with everyone else. And so you're not going to be seen at all. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mateo?
It resonates a lot with me because um, we tend to, as small companies, I think there is a portion of small companies, and I I feel guilty of this as well because I'm just starting out my own consultancy, and there's been times, especially in the early days, where I was looking up at a lot of other marketing agencies, much more established than I am, been around for many years, and was going through their websites, was going through their web properties, whether that's a YouTube channel or a LinkedIn page, and would start comparing myself to them, or even worse, emulating what they were doing, not taking into consideration that those companies have been around for 10, 15, or even longer years, right? And so I think it's important to remain, like you said, true to yourself, because ultimately, if my prospective clients wanted to work with say a company that looks very corporate, that has a certain, brand identity and all that type of stuff, that wouldn't be me. That would be them. And so they could just go and work with them rather than me. And so, like you said, in especially in professional services, um, there are small businesses and there are corporates that do pretty much the same thing. So why would we want to emulate a company that is not us? So I agree with you. I think it's important to just recognize that we don't want to copy other people. We want to be ourselves, because the market is big enough for both the ones that want to work with a corporate type of company, and also there are people and businesses that want to work with smaller companies, local businesses, and want to support those local businesses because they have certain beliefs that a corporate company may not have. So I think it's just really important to, be yourself all the time. I wouldn't go out and try to make friends with people I don't like just because those people seem to be cool for whatever reason. If I don't have a certain interest in, say, playing a certain sport, but I just want to do and play that thing because those people seem to have all the connections that I want to have in my own life for whatever other reason, I wouldn't not enjoy playing that game and potentially not even enjoy being around those people. So I would just really try to consider those things, and consider who you are, what are your beliefs, like you said, and then double down on those and continue presenting and communicating yourself as that type of person. And more people are going to gravitate around you because they have the same beliefs as you.
Yeah, Mateo. And when you were talking about the size, I was thinking about play to your strengths. So let's say that you're a solo entrepreneur who's doing strictly consulting work, and you're limited by the number of hours you can do it because you don't have a whole, ton of employees. Well, not everyone will want to work with you at that size, but guess what? That size comes with a huge advantage in that your first 3, 4, 5, 10 clients are critical to your success. And so you're going to do a lot more than a company that has 50 or 100 employees that is maybe treating that company or that individual more like a number. So at that solo stage, you have some strengths. So maybe highlight what it's like working with a solo, an individual person, solopreneur, right? And then additionally, when you do hit that 5 employees mark, which I think is often a very good spot to be in as a business owner when you're starting off, but that is still probably going to be very personalized, but it's not going to be huge. So don't pretend that you have a staff of 50, because guess what? If you attract people that want the staff of 50 and you're kind of trying to portray yourself as the staff of 50, well, then when they're asking for an RFP or they're going through this process of vetting you and comparing you, you're probably going to feel terribly uncomfortable because you have to kind of blur the edges. You have to kind of, misrepresent yourself a little bit to try to get the deal. Whereas if instead you're highlighting the things that you do have at that size, then you're going to be working with companies that are better suited for you. So I really like the point that we're talking about humanizing the brand, but we're also talking about being honest And I definitely believe that that's better for the long game. It might take a little bit longer to grow. It's a little bit maybe easier in some cases to fake it a little bit more. But I would say, there's a balance there, right? And so I really like your points there. Now let's focus on how to do this. So it's one thing to say how, why you should humanize your brand. As we talked about, it's really to build up trust. It's to get better relationships going. It's to get people to know you so they actually trust and want to work with you. A lot of the inbound marketing things we talk about are going to be affected when you're able to humanize your brand more. But let's think about the actionable things that we can do to start to humanize the brand more. So one of the ones I'll just point out quickly is it's not using a lot of stock photos on your website. I think one simple thing would be to make sure that you have pictures of yourself, at least a fairly professional photographer, hopefully someone who has a good SLR camera or something. Take some nice shots of you. Doesn't have to be terribly expensive, but make sure that you have pictures of yourself, pictures of your team, and pictures of people in the business doing natural things or talking with clients or meeting with clients. We'll dive into this a little bit more at the end of the episode, but I just think that if at all possible, do not use a lot of stock photos on your website and in your marketing collateral. Show pictures of your real team in your real office doing real work. And I think that's a good first step. Do you have any other ideas there, Matteo, of how you could humanize your brand in practice?
Yeah, in practice, and to keep things still very simple, I would say, demonstrate your values, your company values through your actions and your initiatives. Like we talked about before, you're a small company, you might have, you support certain causes in your local community, for example. Show those things to prospective customers, whether that's on your social media pages, LinkedIn page, YouTube videos, even if you have a podcast or just a simple blog on your website. Take photos, use media to communicate your personality. It's very hard to just communicate via text, although that's also possible. You need to just develop your own brand voice. If you are more of, a casual talker, maybe that's reflected in the way you speak and the way your website copy is written. But embrace new media. And by new, it's really not all that new. Videos and photos, use those as much as possible to your advantage. And like I said, so if you participate at a charity event, take photos of that. If you volunteer for a particular cause, or you maybe sponsor, a local sports team or other things of that nature, make sure you document the process of doing this type of activities.
Right. So showcasing the activity that you're having in your community, but also your team. And this brings up a good point, Matteo, about there are some companies that will blog regularly. Maybe they're taking a really big SEO approach where they're saying we need to blog on these 10 topics to get these keywords ranked well. And while those activities are good, if you are promoting that on your social media where it's all about blog article being promoted and things like this, that's going to get old very quickly, meaning that it's important to do those things, but it's not going to add a lot of diversity to your social media channels. And so I think that this is a good air cover or a good way to get more posts going on the social media channels if you're highlighting your community involvement, if you're doing an employee spotlight where you're showing kind of the employee of the month, or you are, again, sharing some donations that the company made, or you are someone got promoted, or you had a Halloween party. This all comes around to humanizing the brand. And what's nice is if the ratio is something like, it does depend on the social media channel, but if the ratio is something like 70% team activity, people, rewards, involvement, and then maybe 20 or 30% is more about your brands, an offer, a webinar you're promoting, right? Then it's not all, join us, join us, join us, buy from us, buy from us, buy from us. It's a little bit more sharing the community, sharing what's going on, and then sprinkling in some offers into that mix. I think that's going to be a little bit more balanced. But do you have any thoughts on that, Matteo, as far as the ratios? I mean, yeah, obviously, different social media channels are better for different things, But have you seen any good ratios from many companies where you say, oh, you know what, they have a good human element, but then they also do have a good balance of offers where they're not bombarding people by pitching themselves too much? What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe I'll just take a slightly different angle, and I maybe want to say that you can communicate your offers, you can educate your audience by, say, recording videos, for example. And I also think that, using this type of, medium videos to educate your target market on social media or on your website is also a good way to humanize the brand. Because what I see a lot of times is that companies tend to hide themselves behind text for a lot of their communication. And text is the easiest medium we can use to communicate, although also probably the oldest that we know. But if you embrace recording videos, which we talked about in a previous episode, and share those on your channels, I think that's also a good way to, sprinkle in your own personality while you're educating your target market about the problems that you solve with your services. I think that's a good way to really, strike a good balance between sharing, you know, community activities and educational content while still, humanizing the brand at the same time. Um, Another idea could be, and again, creativity here is limitless. You could literally just do anything you think about, and that will humanize the brand at the same time. One thing that I did with a client of mine was to start an interview series with the employees of this client of mine. And basically, we would set up a short 20 to 30-minute interview with different people within the company and basically talk about you know, their hobbies, but also their responsibilities within the company. What do they do in their day-to-day job? What type of work do they do for their clients? What type of work do they do for the team they're in? And what type of contribution, what type of ideas? Generally, it was really about, like you said, an employee spotlight, so to speak, right? And trying to humanize the people that are their clients were paying for the services that this company was offering. So I think that's another simple way, and it doesn't have to be anything complicated. You don't need to be at the office necessarily to record these type of things. If you are a remote company, you could still use tools like Zoom or Riverside and have this type of face-to-face virtual calls recorded and then published on your channels. And you could use them also on your website so that when people visit your service pages, for example, specific to a certain service you offer, you might have done an interview with a specialist that takes care of that particular service, and you might embed that interview on that page. People will just maybe not going to watch it entirely, but knowing who is behind behind that service specifically, who is going to be taking care of them after they decide to sign up. I think it's a very powerful way to really bring out the personality of a.
Oh yeah, I think that's going to be a common thread we're always going to touch on in a lot of our episodes is the importance of video. And so, as we talked about photos, and a photo shoot is probably one of the easiest ones. Videos of employees, as you said, Mateo, is relatively easy because it's people that are already sitting at their desk doing things, and you might as well get them in a room and talk to them about maybe what they do or, how they work with clients, right? So that's a really good one. Something that I've touched on before, but one of my clients has now got into the routine of recording a video that is relevant. It could be a service offering, but it could also just be updates in the industry on certain things. And sure enough, it's like the first few videos got a few hundred views. We just recently, in the last couple of days, had a video posted over the weekend that got 5,000 views. And that was just because we got in this consistent routine of always recording a video, because some people accept information through video over text, right? Some people would rather watch a video than listen to or than read a blog article. And guess what? That serves two purposes, because now we're getting in front of people we wouldn't otherwise get in front of. And back to the point of this episode, humanizing your brand. Guess what happens when people end up working with that company that I'm referring to? They say all the time, "Hey, I saw your video. Hey, you did the best job explaining this." And the number of people that had that overlap between they had watched a few of our videos and they worked with us is huge.
Mm.
And that's just because we got the face out there of the owner. And so it can be faces of the team, but ideally you're getting the face of the owner out there. And then there's other things, again, the more advanced one, I'm just layering on the more complexity, but then there's the podcast side of things, or the interviews with external people. And that's worked great for another client of mine, because it was interviewing local business owners and getting them to come to the office and talk about the impact they're having in the local community and the society there, right? And so that's another way to have an excuse to have videos where you get to learn about the people we want to promote in the community, but additionally learn about the people that are doing the interviews and conducting the interviews. And you get to see how they talk, how they interact, why they're working with these people in the community, the impact they're trying to make. And so it's just a great way to get those touch points. But Mateo, you'd also talked about maybe after the sale. So let's go ahead and say that people have watched some of our videos, or they've seen our office and non-stock photography, like the real picture of our team, but now they're actually working with us. And I think you had some ideas on ways that you could keep that human connection going after the sale. What were your thoughts there?
Yes. So again, it's really, it depends a bit about whether you are a remote company or whether you work mostly with local businesses. I think this probably will depend a bit, but I would say always try as much as possible, whether you're remote or not, to default to face-to-face conversation rather than faceless conversation. And by faceless, I mean either just a phone call or email communication. So if you're remote, try to schedule, arrange Zoom calls rather than just communicating via email. And the same if you're a local business, try to meet clients, maybe not all the time, but once a quarter on a face-to-face basis. I think those interactions are valuable because, ultimately clients want to keep, keep the update or get updated by the company they're paying for. But they also want to build a relationship. They want to know who is behind sort of the service that they are paying for. And I think those interactions are more valuable than just sending a monthly report and, asking for feedback via email. I think those things go a much longer way in my opinion.
Yeah. And I can think too that people are hesitant to show their face sometimes, but if we were to layer on the most easy to the most impactful, I've done some things like voice, like audio voicemail, messages in an email. So if that's me explaining something briefly, getting my voice is, I think, going to be better than just getting my text. So there are some tools that allow you to do that. I wouldn't say that's the best one, but it could be the most convenient. And sometimes a company that you're working with might actually prefer that. So in any case, voice is better than text, in my opinion. And you can also have those tools transcribe. So if people can't listen to it, then they can at least read the text, right? So it's kind of serving both purposes. Then, as you said, Mateo, let's say that someone has a question for you. You could respond to them in text, or you could say, I'm going to record a Loom video. There are tools like SendSpark that I personally use, but Loom or other tools can do the same thing. And a lot of people, let me be clear, if you're in more of a tech industry, for instance, some of your team members might be hesitant to show their face. And so if you look at some of maybe the Loom videos they send, they might be hiding the camera and just doing a walkthrough of a screen share. That's better than nothing, but I would say turn on that camera, because if you encourage people to turn on the camera, whether or not you have blemishes on your face or it's not a good hair day, I would argue that's better than not showing your face, because now they feel like they're actually interacting with a human being who's not just showing a cursor on the screen, but is actually showing their face. And so that's, I think, the next level up. And then, depending on convenience factor of whether or not your client likes to interact this way, as you said, then you're dealing with a live call. And yes, that requires a little planning, scheduling, etc. But then now you're actually having a quick call with someone. And sometimes timing can be important. I know I fall into the category sometimes of recording too long of videos. And so it can easily, I'm sharing something and I decide I share 10 things at that time. It ends up being a 20-minute video. But I think when you're sticking to video, you have to also make sure you're packaging the video in the way that it's easily consumable by the person watching or listening to it. And so ideally, you're keeping the videos quite short, because if you have a 5-minute video that you can explain something, then that's a way that they listen to your voice, they saw your face, they got some benefit. And if they need something more, then maybe that Zoom call or something else like that is something they could then transition into. But less than five, like a 2 to 5 minute video is kind of a sweet spot in my mind for that. Any other thoughts, Matteo, for ways we could humanize?
No, I cannot think of anything at this point. I would say just keep on having regular touch points with clients. I think clients value over communication rather than under communication. So, obviously you want to communicate things or touch base with clients when you have something important to say, but try to keep that, cadence pretty regularly so that, clients will always feel like you're there for them whenever, they need you, but also that you are present whenever, there is something important to share for.
Sure. I did think of one additional thing that I think is a pretty easy win. Something I just implemented again just today with one of my clients. And it was, we had a situation where we wanted to offer something that could be purchased right away. So a lot of what we do is consulting hands-on, but in some cases there are services that are lower cost, easy services that we want people to be able to buy now. Well, here's the thing. If you take out your credit card and you buy something now, that is the most vulnerable period of time, right? It's that, was I scammed? Was this worth it? Should I have spent this? Let's say it's $200 or $300. Should I have spent that? Did I make the right decision? And so one way to tie in humanizing again is on that confirmation page, after they make a payment or after they submit a form or after they interact with you in that way, consider on your thank you page or the confirmation page to have a short video saying thank you, right? And so in this case, we have that coming from the owner and we say, hey, thank you for trusting us and choosing us to help you with XYZ service. This is what's going to happen next. You're going to hear from us in this way next. And we just are going to love working with you, right? And so I've done that for years on my own websites and it impacted my clients. They loved it. And so sure enough, I implement it anytime I can on my clients' websites. And it's something that you can literally, again, record on Loom or your local, Chrome extension that records videos and then embed it on your website on a thank you page. Now that is a quick, easy implementation where you're getting someone in the most important critical phase, like I said, right after a purchase, and it takes 2 minutes to record a video like that. So that was my final tip for that. Now, in the last couple minutes, Matteo, I thought we could maybe think through a photo shoot. So let's say that some of the listeners decide that they're going to go ahead and take an action and get rid of some of those stock photos on their website and their marketing collateral, and they're going to bring a photographer out. Let me start with one tip around this, and then we can talk about some additional tips about the photo shoot itself. But as I said at the beginning of the episode, this doesn't have to be a pro photographer that has 15 years of experience and charges a huge amount. It could be someone who is relatively new. They're experienced, but they're not the most experienced. I'm not always suggesting this, but I'm just saying if you're not going to do it because of the expense, consider someone that's a bit less experienced but wants to prove themselves. It's maybe not going to go perfectly, but I would say it's definitely better than not having a photographer out. So I think you could get someone that's in their 20s or been studying photography in school for 3 years. And that's one little shortcut to how you could get a cheaper photo shoot. And then as long as you can guide them in some of the things that we're going to talk about later in these tips, then you can probably get a good bang for your buck out of that. So if you're restricted by budget, don't, there are workarounds there to get you a relatively inexpensive photo shoot in your office. But what about the photo shoot itself? Do you have any suggestions for an office photo shoot to humanize your brand?
To me, the best photos I've seen of local businesses, professional service companies, are generally mostly candid photos. So I would try to avoid as much as possible to pose for a photo and rather be in your natural, office environment, working, maybe communicating with a colleague, and have the photographer, roam around the office and guide them to, take photos, not just of you as a close-up, but maybe more of the environment of you within, the office with other colleagues, maybe during a meeting, that could be another interesting, time to take photos. And, while you're discussing, could be a monthly strategy meeting or whatever other type of meeting you're having. I think those are good times where, this type of photos could be taken. In my opinion, those are the best photos. They really show everybody within the office being in their sort of natural habitat, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a great one. Absolutely. The candid photos, showing them doing actual work and what it would be like interacting with them, not just smiling and saying cheese for the camera, right? I would say it can be helpful to have one form of post photo, and that would just be the profile shot. And so if you don't want this from every team member, potentially it's just of your leadership team. And, if you find an area of the office that has a certain background color so you can keep it consistent, then, have those profile shots taken. And then on that leadership page, at least you can have the bios of the CFO, the CTO, and so on and so forth. And then if person leaves or is added, you can always go to that same location in the office with that same background to keep things nice and consistent. So that's really the only posing. Well, that's one posing photo type I would have, is just the profile shots. It's just nice to have them. And usually it's inexpensive and cheap to be able to do. It's relatively simple and you don't have to overcomplicate it. And then, of course, a team photo I think is helpful. Sometimes when it's a large team, it could be in front of the office. It could be, it depends on how big, again, the team is and where you can have it. But I think it's helpful to have that full team photo. If you've grown to a size of 15 and 20 employees, you might want to show that. We talked before, maybe if you have a 3 or 5 person team, maybe you don't do that. I don't know. But if you have a larger team and you want to show off that that is the size that you've achieved, and so they better know that you can offer a certain level of service at that team size or efficiencies you might not get it with a smaller company. Maybe you show that off and you show a posing photo. So I think that could work. But then if we think about those authentic moments, as you said, those candid photos, Matteo, I think that it is good to go in knowing the type of candid shots that you might want. I know that's almost counter to the point of a candid shot. It's like it should be candid when people are actually working, but it can be tough to have a photographer out where everything just happens to appear in the right way at the right time during those 3 hours that the photographer's there. So one tip that I have here is to go to those stock photo sites and use those as inspiration. So potentially you see on that stock photo site, 2 people working with each other and having some sort of a consultation. So it's someone sitting at a table and someone else sitting at the table and they're talking together and consulting with each other, right? Well, in your adaptation of that, you might want a photo like that. So you say, well, for us, I want to make sure one of our coffee mugs is there in the corner where it's like branding it, showing it's our real team. I want to make sure people are wearing the polo shirts they usually wear at the office. But for the most part, I want kind of something similar to that. And if you can give that to the photographer, now they have a shot they want to take. And now you can figure out and plan where in the office that would be well suited for. There's also other shots where they might not be of people's faces. They might be of office environment, for areas on your website that need a very long or narrow shot. So I think of the masthead of a website where you're going to put the title of a page or a service that you're offering. Sometimes that's a very narrow thing, and putting a group of people meeting with each other doesn't really fit in that spot at that, in those dimensions in that aspect ratio. And so sometimes if you have something like, again, a coffee mug, or some plants in the office or something like that, where you can get a nice angle view and little areas of that photo can be cropped out to fit into those spots. So a few of those is, I think, helpful. But really the summary here is get inspiration. Don't just hope that that photographer is going to know what to take. Have an idea of the types of places you want to use on your website and in your marketing collateral, and get that inspiration from somewhere. So now you actually have a game plan and say, I want at least these 8 shots because I think I can use these as in critical areas of my website. And so get those at a very minimum. All right. So any closing thoughts on the subject, Matteo, whether it be the in-office photo shoot or humanizing your brand, or how important it is in your mind to start taking some of these actions?
Yeah, I think I'll just go back to something you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, that in professional services, we're really not just selling our expertise, but we're really mostly selling trust, right? And so trust doesn't wear a suit. So I would say build trust by showing who you are, who your company is, and the people behind it.
Absolutely. Well, since we are here humanizing our own brand and ourselves, Mateo, I think the call to action here and what I ask of you all is, as basically small podcasters here, I hope that you can help us by spreading the word of this podcast, sharing it with your friends, anyone who you think might benefit from hearing some of these messages. And of course, liking or subscribing to the channel, whether that be on the podcast platform or on YouTube. You know, do anything that you can to get our faces out there a little bit more. And that would be super helpful to us as fellow human beings. So thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, you learned something in this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.